Join us as we uncover the unsettling details of 5 unusual deaths, each defying expectation in haunting ways. These stories reveal how sudden danger lurks where it's least expected, claiming lives, sparking outrage, and leaving an unforgettable impact on those left behind. In November 2018, Elena Struthers Gardner was at home in Dorset, England, preparing to have a drink. It was a quiet evening, but what followed next was a tragic accident involving a seemingly harmless household item. Elena, known as Lena to those close to her, was 60 years old and lived in Broadstone, Dorset, England. Over the years, the woman had come to know both success and struggle. Once an accomplished equestrian, she had dedicated much of her youth to the competitive equestrian world. She had trained in eventing, show jumping, and dressage, and even worked with national hunt horses in Newbury, Berkshire. She had a promising career ahead of her. However, her dreams were shattered by a devastating accident at the age of 21, when a riding mishap left her with severe spinal injuries. This traumatic event marked the beginning of a long battle with chronic pain and mobility issues. Following her accident, Elena endured multiple fractures to her lumbar spine, leading to scoliosis and intense, constant pain. Her mobility became compromised, and she was frequently prone to sudden collapses, described by her wife Mandy Struthers Gardner as falling like a sack of potatoes. The years of pain management had taken a toll on her, and she required high doses of fentanyl to cope. As her medication levels were later reduced, she developed a dependency on alcohol. By the time of her death, she was reportedly drinking around half a liter of vodka daily, often mixed with orange juice in a mason jar with a screw-top lid, a habit that led to the fatal incident. On November 22, 2018, Elena was in her kitchen, holding a mason jar-style glass equipped with a metal straw. Suddenly, Elena collapsed, and the 10-inch stainless steel straw fixed in place by the screw-top lid became a lethal weapon. The metal straw entered Elena's left eye socket and pierced her brain. Her wife Mandy, who was home at the time, did not hear the fall but found Elena shortly afterward. Lying face down, Elena was making unusual, gurgling sounds, and Mandy, noticing the straw protruding from her head, immediately called for an ambulance. Paramedics rushed her to Southampton General Hospital, but the severity of her injuries left little hope for recovery. Specialists informed Mandy that Elena's injuries were too severe, and the following day, her life support was turned off. Forensic examination of the incident was thorough. Dr. David Parham, who conducted the post-mortem, confirmed that the straw had entered through Elena's left eyelid and pierced her brainstem, a critical area responsible for functions such as breathing. The investigation into Elena's death highlighted the rare but significant dangers associated with metal drinking straws. Assistant Coroner Brendan Allen issued a warning, emphasizing the risks of using fixed metal straws in rigid lids. With no give or flexibility, the metal straw could not move upon impact, resulting in catastrophic injuries. Great care should be taken when using these metal straws, Allen stated, stressing that they should never be fixed in place by lids or similar devices. Had the lid not held the straw stationary, it likely would have dislodged rather than impaled her eye. However, there wasn't sufficient evidence to explain how Elena came to fall. There was no alcohol in her system at the moment of the accident, nor could the assistant coroner conclude that any reduction in fentanyl could have caused Lena's fall. The aftermath of Elena's death left her wife and loved ones grappling with shock and grief. Mandy spoke of the profound loss, describing Elena as someone taken far too early. In her grief, Mandy has expressed her hope that others would heed the tragic lesson in Elena's story. She remarked on the dangers of these straws, particularly for individuals with mobility issues or young children. On April 17, 2018, Jennifer Reardon was on board Southwest Airlines Flight 1380, seated by a window as the plane cruised above Pennsylvania. She was flying from New York City to Dallas. It was a routine flight, but an unexpected and tragic turn changed everything. Jennifer Reardon, a 43-year-old from Albuquerque, was known for her dedication to her family, career, and community. As Vice President of Community Relations at Wells Fargo in Albuquerque, she managed over 1,000 employees' volunteer efforts and contributed significantly to various philanthropic causes across the Southwest. Jennifer was a respected leader, a wife, and a mother of two, and she was returning home to her family when she boarded Flight 1380 on April 17, 2018. However, about 20 minutes into the journey, the otherwise uneventful flight took a turn when a catastrophic event sent shockwaves through the cabin and marked a tragic chapter in U.S. aviation history. The trouble began when one of the plane's engine fan blades suddenly fractured. The fan blade, having endured over 32,000 flights, succumbed to metal fatigue, an issue overlooked during previous inspections. The fan blade's failure set off a disastrous chain reaction as the engine cover disintegrated, sending pieces of shrapnel flying with explosive force. Some of this debris struck the fuselage, ultimately smashing through the plexiglass window near Jennifer's seat. This breach caused a rapid decompression, sucking Jennifer partially out of the broken window. As flight attendants Rachel Fernheimer and Shanique Mallory rushed to assess the damage, they spotted Jennifer with her torso, head, and arm outside the plane, while the rest of her body remained strapped in by her lap belt. In a desperate attempt to save her, the flight attendants clung to Jennifer's legs as two nearby passengers joined in, one reaching out the window to secure her shoulder. Amid the chaotic scene, with oxygen masks deployed and smoke filling the cabin, they fought to pull Jennifer back inside. With Jennifer now inside the plane, the two flight attendants asked for medical volunteers. A paramedic and a nurse took over the rescue operation. They attempted to use a defibrillator, but it indicated there was no shock. As such, they took turns at CPR in hopes of reviving Jennifer. But Jennifer's injuries proved too extensive. The severity of the impact meant survival was nearly impossible. As the tragedy unfolded, the pilots worked to control the jet, which had sharply tilted to the left due to the explosion's impact. The entire cabin was gripped with fear as the plane descended rapidly to an altitude where passengers could breathe without the masks. The pilots skillfully guided the aircraft to an emergency landing at Philadelphia International Airport, bringing the flight's remaining 144 passengers and 5 crew members to safety. Jennifer Reardon was tragically dead, having sustained severe blunt force trauma injuries to her head, neck, and torso from both the shrapnel and the plane's fuselage. Her death marked the first fatal in-flight accident on a U.S. airline in nearly a decade. The incident prompted an in-depth investigation by the National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, which focused on the failed fan blade and the safety mechanisms designed to contain such an event. The NTSB hearing revealed that the blade that fractured was last inspected in 2012, using techniques that were inadequate to detect the metal fatigue. CFM International, the engine's manufacturer, had initially considered fan blades to have no lifetime limit, believing them to be virtually indestructible. In response to the accident, CFM recommended more advanced inspection methods, including ultrasound and electrical current testing, which could more accurately detect microscopic fractures. These inspections, now mandatory, have already led to the replacement of several blades on similar engines showing signs of fatigue. In a statement, Jennifer's husband, Michael Reardon, expressed his hope that lessons from the incident would prevent future tragedies. Jennifer's colleagues and community members remembered her as a compassionate leader who inspired others to give back. In memory of Jennifer, the Reardon family founded the Jennifer Reardon Foundation, aimed at continuing her legacy of kindness and community service. It was June 8, 2014. Grant Adams' Sunday morning began like any other, with the 17-year-old just waking up at his home in South Shields. But within moments, what should have been an ordinary day took a dramatic and tragic turn, leaving his family and community in shock. Grant was more than just a teenager. He was a soon-to-be father, anticipating the arrival of his daughter with his girlfriend, Shauna Gardner, age 16, who was 7 months pregnant. He had already picked a name for his little girl, Rakia. Grant's life, though young, was filled with hopes and dreams for the future. He had recently purchased his first car and was taking driving lessons. His 18th birthday was approaching, and with it, the promise of a new chapter. Grant's family included his mother, 37-year-old Amanda Smedley, who he shared his home with, and his sister, 20-year-old Natasha, who had a young daughter herself. The tragedy that struck their family happened swiftly. Early on that quiet Sunday, Grant had just stepped out of bed when he tripped over a wire in his third-floor bedroom. In a tragic stroke of fate, he lost his balance and fell onto a freestanding sunbed his mother had been storing in his room. The impact was catastrophic. One of the glass UV tubes shattered, and a sharp fragment pierced his jugular vein in 2 places. Disoriented and gravely injured, Grant attempted to pull the glass shard from his neck in shock, further aggravating the injury, and made his way toward the stairs in a desperate attempt to find help. However, the injury proved too severe, and he collapsed at the bottom of the stairs, where his mother soon found him in a pool of blood. Amanda, his mother, heard the thuds from upstairs and immediately rushed to her son, only to find him bleeding heavily. Panicked, she called for help, and her partner attempted to stem the bleeding until paramedics arrived. Emergency services, including the Great North Air Ambulance, responded rapidly, arriving within minutes to treat Grant at the scene at about 9 a.m. that Sunday morning. He was airlifted to Newcastle's Royal Victoria Infirmary in critical condition, but the damage was too extensive. Despite the efforts of medical professionals, Grant succumbed to his injuries on June 9, 2014. The sudden tragic loss left Grant's family and friends devastated. For his girlfriend Shauna, the shock was unimaginable. She shared her sorrow publicly, expressing her love and the bittersweet comfort of carrying a part of him with her in the form of their unborn child. Grant's sister Natasha, who had always been close to him, described how eagerly he looked forward to becoming a father despite initial nerves. The family now sees Shauna and baby Rukia as the remaining pieces of Grant's legacy, clinging to them as a reminder of the vibrant young man they lost. Friends and members of the South Shields community were stunned by the news, struggling to comprehend how such an unusual and heartbreaking accident could claim the life of a promising young man on the brink of adulthood. Grant had always been known as a lively, active teenager who loved boxing and cherished time spent with friends and family. His sister Natasha shared how her brother had weathered numerous accidents before, including motorbike spills and other typical teenage incidents, and that it seemed unthinkable that something as unexpected as a fall onto a sunbed could prove fatal. Grant's organs were donated in the wake of his passing. His family took solace in knowing that his final act would be to help others, even as they wrestled with the magnitude of their loss. "It would have been what Grant would have wanted," Natasha said. "There are people waiting for transplants, and hopefully Grant's organs will help someone else. We don't want any other family to have to go through what we've gone through." It was the summer of 2011. Chris Staniforth had spent countless hours doing what he loved most, gaming. Chris was no stranger to losing himself in his favorite virtual worlds, sometimes until the early hours. That particular night, though, was different, and the following day would turn devastating. What began as a normal morning for the young gamer quickly spiraled into tragedy, and within hours, his family's lives would be changed forever. Chris, a 20-year-old from Sheffield, England, was well known to his family and friends as a dedicated gamer. He could often be found sitting in front of his Xbox, deeply engrossed in games like Halo, sometimes for up to 12 hours straight. His passion for gaming was more than just a hobby. It was also Chris's aspiration. He had recently been accepted into a game design program at Leicester University, where he hoped to turn his love of gaming into a career. His father, David Staniforth, recalled how Chris had lived for his Xbox and how his son's dream had always been to create worlds just like the ones he'd enjoyed exploring. It was that unrelenting commitment to gaming that led Chris to spend hours on end sitting at his desk, rarely taking breaks or moving around. What his family and even Chris himself were unaware of was the silent, hidden danger lurking in his prolonged inactivity. One night in 2011, Chris had likely stayed up all night, as he had many times before, absorbed in gaming. By morning, he was scheduled to visit a local job center with a friend to discuss career opportunities, a small step toward securing a future he had been working toward. However, that morning, while waiting outside the job center, he felt an unfamiliar tightness in his chest. His friend later recalled that Chris had been experiencing odd pains, but hadn't thought much of them. Chris then dropped a pack of gum, He bent down to pick it up and suddenly began convulsing. Panicked, his friend called for an ambulance, but despite the paramedics' immediate response, they were unable to save him. By the time he arrived at the hospital, Chris had succumbed to a condition most commonly associated with long-haul travelers, deep vein thrombosis, or DVT. A DVT occurs when a blood clot forms in a deep vein, typically in the leg, due to prolonged periods of immobility. In Chris's case, the clot had formed during his long hours of gaming, sitting still for extended periods with limited movement. Tragically, the clot eventually traveled to his lungs, resulting in a pulmonary embolism, a blockage in the main artery that delivers oxygenated blood to the lungs. It is a serious condition that, if untreated, can be fatal. For Chris, the discovery was devastatingly too late. Chris's father, David, was left to grapple with the loss of his son. David, who had always known Chris as a young man with no prior health issues, could hardly comprehend how his son's passion for gaming had led to such a tragic end. David spoke publicly about his son's case, highlighting the reality that long periods of immobility, whether during gaming, travel, or any sedentary activity, could pose serious health risks. He shared his heartbreak with the world, hoping to warn other parents and gamers about the hidden dangers of extended gaming sessions. While Chris's death could easily have been attributed to his love for gaming, David was careful not to place blame on the industry or the technology itself. Instead, he focused on raising awareness about the importance of taking breaks, moving around, and understanding the risks of sitting for extended periods. "Don't stop your child from playing games," David advised other parents. "They love doing it. It's great for them. Just be aware, enjoy it, but take a break." Late one evening in 2020, while attempting to disperse an illegal cockfight in his homeland, the Philippines, Lieutenant Christian Bolak found himself facing an unexpected danger. As he reached out to confiscate one of the roosters, a single fatal move changed everything. In the Philippines, cockfighting, or tupada, holds a deep-rooted cultural place, traditionally tied to gatherings and celebrations. However, these fights also involve significant risks, not only to the birds but also to human participants. A steel blade, known as a gaff, is often strapped to a rooster's leg to maximize damage during a fight. Despite the thrill and tradition associated with cockfights, in 2020 these events were made illegal, especially since the COVID pandemic led authorities to ban gatherings. Despite the ban, underground cockfights continued, and in October 2020, Lieutenant Bolak and his team were enforcing restrictions as they responded to reports of an illegal gathering in the village of Madugang, northern Samar. Christian, in his mid-30s and dedicated to upholding the law, led the San Jose police force with unwavering commitment. That evening, he joined his team to break up an illicit cockfight in the hope of stopping not only the gambling and cruelty, but also the potential spread of the virus. These events had been linked to local COVID-19 outbreaks, which by then had claimed thousands of lives across the Philippines. It was just as Christian attempted to confiscate a rooster, one of the animal's gaffs, a razor-sharp metal blade strapped tightly to the animal's leg, sliced into his upper thigh, puncturing his femoral artery. This critical blood vessel, once severed, led to rapid and uncontrollable blood loss. Fellow officers on the scene tried urgently to help their wounded lieutenant. They used a cloth in a desperate attempt to create a makeshift tourniquet. But with limited time and supplies, the efforts to stanch the bleeding proved inadequate. In mere minutes, Christian was losing a dangerous amount of blood, and paramedics were called to rush him to the provincial hospital. Despite their best efforts, Christian Bolak was declared dead on arrival. The sharp blade of the rooster had caused fatal trauma, underscoring the severe hazards associated with cockfights, risks that extended far beyond the arena. Edwin Ong Chuan, governor of Northern Samar, voiced his sorrow and frustration, emphasizing the tragic loss of a dedicated officer whose commitment to enforcing health and safety regulations cost him his life. Ong Chuan noted that the team had taken every possible precaution that evening, fully aware of the risks they faced in the raid. "We grieve with our provincial police in the loss of such a committed and selfless officer," Ong Chuan remarked, recognizing Christian's sacrifice in protecting his community. To honor Christian service, the local government offered support to his family, ensuring they were not left to bear their grief alone. His colleagues and community remember Christian Bollock as a brave officer and a selfless protector of his people, a memory that will not soon be forgotten.